when you break it up into demographics, the African American community are at an astronomical number. Over 70% of the black community experiences fatherlessness or fatherless homes in this country. So why am I making this video? Because I want to point out to you very succinctly and very clearly why it is important for fathers to be at the house. Why it is important not to have children out of wedlock, and especially if you're not going to be involved in your child's life. Don't believe me, listen to the stats. First stat reads, suicide. 62% of youth without a father commit suicide. Runaways. 90% of all homeless and runaway youth don't have a daddy at home. Behavioral disorders. 85% of all children that exhibit behavioral disorders don't have a daddy. High school dropouts. 71% of all high school dropouts don't have a daddy in their life. Juvenile detention rates. 70% of juveniles in state-operated institutions, they ain't got a daddy at home. Substance abuse. 75% of adolescent patients in substance abuse centers don't have a daddy. Last one, aggression. 75% of rapists motivated by displaced anger don't have a daddy. So now that I've read you all the statistics, who in the world, in their right mind, will disagree that fatherlessness is the biggest plague in America when it comes to the home and when it comes to the operational abilities of young children, especially in the black community? And
the media can get to your kids to incite you to do anything when you don't have an authority figure around. Now, you see me, I'm black, but this right here ain't it. This is right here being a victim. Now, if you have a father that's leading you, you're not going to be a victim. If you grew up with a father, you're not going to be out there thinking that this is going to make a difference. See, I teach my kids they're not victims. You make your own way. You design your own path.
This has been going on for a long time now. Check this out.
Your children not looking to you as a mother for wisdom and guidance. They'll tell you what they saw on TV. I saw Oprah's show, and Oprah said. And I saw so-and-so, and they said. You ain't got no more say-so. They've taken over. This is not accident. This is by design. You ain't the man in your house no more. Satan is king in your house. He rules your wife and your children. Try and tell your wife, take that damn lipstick off. Try and tell her, hey baby, cover yourself. Try and make your daughters righteous. See what they'll tell you.
It's all by design, guys.
As between the presence of white racism and the absence of black fathers, I asked him, which poses the bigger threat to the black community? Without missing a beat, he said, the absence of black fathers. It was President Barack Obama who said, we all know these statistics, that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. The Journal of Research on Adolescence confirms that even after controlling for varying levels of household income, kids in father-absent homes are more likely to end up in jail. And kids who never had a father in the house are the most likely to wind up behind bars. In 1960, 5% of America's children entered the world without a mother and father married to each other. By 1980, it was 18%. By 2000, it had risen to 33%, and 15 years later, the number reached 41%. For blacks, even during slavery, when marriage for slaves was illegal, black children were more likely than today to be raised by both their mother and father. Economist Walter Williams has written that, according to census data from 1890 to 1940, a black child was more likely to grow up with married parents than a white child. For blacks, Out-of-wedlock births have gone from 25% in 1965 to 73% in 2015. For whites, from less than 5% to over 25%, and for Hispanics, out-of-wedlock births have risen to 53%. What happened to fathers? The answer is found in a basic law of economics. If you subsidize undesirable behavior, you will get more undesirable behavior. In 1949, the nation's poverty rate was 34%. By 1965, it was cut in half to 17%, all before President Lyndon Johnson's so-called war on poverty. But after that war began in 1965, poverty began to flatline. From 1965 until now, the government has spent over $20 trillion to fight poverty. The poverty rate has remained unchanged, but the relationship between poor men and women has changed dramatically. That's because our generous welfare system allows women, in effect, to marry the government. And this makes it all too easy for men to abandon their traditional moral and financial responsibilities. Psychologists call such dependency learned helplessness. How do we know that the welfare state creates disincentives that hurt the very people we're trying to help? They tell us. In 1985, the Los Angeles Times asked both the poor and the non-poor whether poor women often have children to get additional benefits. Most of the non-poor respondents said no. However, 64% of poor respondents said yes. Now, who do you think is in a better position to know? Tupac Shakur, the late rapper, once said, "I know for a fact that had I had a father, I'd have some discipline, I'd have more confidence." He admitted he began running with gangs because he wanted the things a father gives to a child, especially to a boy: structure and protection. "Your mother cannot calm you down the way a man can," Shakur said. "You need a man to teach you how to be a man." In my book, Dear Father, Dear Son, I write about my rough, tough World War II Marine Staff Sergeant dad. Born in the Jim Crow South of Athens, Georgia, he was 14 at the start of the Great Depression. Growing up, I watched my father work 2 full-time jobs as a janitor. He also cooked for a rich family on the weekends and somehow managed to go to night school to get his GED. When I was 10, my father opened a small restaurant that he ran until he retired in his mid-80s. He was never angry or bitter and insisted that today's America was very different from the world of racial segregation and limited opportunity in which he grew up. "Hard work wins," he told me and my brothers. "You get out of life what you put into it. You can't control the outcome, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before blaming other people, go to the nearest mirror and ask yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome?" This advice shaped my life. Fathers matter. Until we have a government policy that makes that its first priority, nothing will change. I'm Larry Elder for Prager University.
Dads. Taking it from dads, from our hard work. One of the most important things about our work, especially in days like today, is job security. Now, if you work in the family law system, how do you ensure job security?
By making sure dads don't get custody.
Yeah, you break the home.
Yep.
You break the home and you make that father fight for his child.
Otherwise, lawyers wouldn't have a job. Lawyers.
How many lawyers did you say you had?
6.
6 lawyers?
$435 an hour.
$435 an hour.
$560,000 in debt.
Or
Over half a million.
right.
My God.
Over $500,000
And I have receipts and all that.
for 8 weekends a year?
8 weekends a year.
8 weekends
Why
a
did I
year.
have to spend $500,000 just to get that? I could have just spent zero.
They're working it over on you. That's horrible.
And the
And they
better
know.
job you have, the better of a provider you are as
Yeah.
a father,
I wasn't-
is the more you're going to pay to not be a father.
I
Yeah.
had a government job for the state of Oregon.
And they'll separate. Even if you have a court order with liberal visitation and the custodial parent decides they don't like the way you talk to them or they just don't like something.
They don't like the way you parent.
They don't like the way your rules are. They can just stop letting you have them. Guess what? Even with a court order, they can keep you from your child. It's a civil matter.
But you can go be a stepdad, can't you?
You can go be a stepdad.
Yep.
My kid's stepdad spends more time with my kids than I do.
But you can spend some time with someone else's kids every day.
Yep. It just isn't right. So the job security at the family court system is done. We've had enough.
Yeah.
We just want to be parents. We just want to be there for those moments in life.
And we're not taking the kids totally from their moms.
Yeah.
No,
We just want
50-50.
equal.
We want it even. We want,
We want to give our children a chance.
like my sign says, incentivize fatherhood. Don't charge it interest.
9%. 9% I'm being charged in Oregon.
How much?
9%.
9%. They charge these ridiculous interest rates for child support
To see my own kids.
to see your own kids. And
I paid $666 devil number
$666
for supervised visit 2 hour.
for 2 hours.
I have receipts as well.
Supervised.
Supervised visits.
Never
Even
did,
with
never
all
done
of
anything
the
wrong.
evidence.
Nope. Supervised visits for 4
Just
months.
claims.
Supervised visitation, like you're
$666. I'm like, that's a devil number from Revelations in the Bible, so I don't.
And if
Just
we,
because a judge said so.
yep, we make claims, we get laughed at.
Yeah. And then one father was trying to actually has evidence, was trying to put her some charges, and then from Salem, Oregon, and you know what the DHS anyways, yeah, I think it was DHS worker or somebody says, how dare you to put your your children's mother in the jail or whatever.
Female in this
Well, if you do the crime, you do the time. But not in family court. You don't have to do anything. You just have to be a father.
Lying in court is criminal unless it's family court.
Unless it's family court. Perjury is punishable by law, except for in family court.
It's accepted in family court.
It's accepted. As a matter of fact, lawyers cook it up oftentimes.
Accepted by the females only.
Just look at the society where we're at now. Look at where we're at now. We're so divided. And at the root core of most of all of our problems in this nation comes down to a broken home.
Yep. Yep.
Look at the statistics. Suicide rates
Incarceration.
between fathers, teens, incarceration,
Mental health. Behavior.
mental health. See, there you go. That's more of the job security for courts. You break the home, charge the father, lawyers benefit from it, the court benefits from it, the state benefits from it, psychologists benefit from it, public services benefit from it, pharmaceuticals benefit from it. Everything is attached to the family. Where would we be without family? We all go through, hard times together, and some of us just can't make it together. That's fine. But let's move on together still, as a family. We're all family.
Their involvement has destroyed the institution of marriage. They don't give many couples options and they interfere. I try to advise men of what they can anticipate if they decide to be married. If they don't do their due diligence and they rely on the media to sell them marriage, which they say it's about love, well then what's going to happen is he's going to find out the hard way that there are judges, mediators, lawyers, child support offices, child protective services, a lot of people that are involved in the institution of marriage, which benefits the court if your family is destroyed.
Disgruntled. This is just the reality of it. So women, we're more educated now, and I think that we're furthering our education. So with that being said, we're going to hold off on the baby making. We're going to hold off until we get that great job, really career driven. And I don't think there's anything wrong with hoping that there's someone either on your level or higher than you.
Miss Amaker presented the topic of marriage decline in the country because women struggle to find financially eligible bachelors. You just heard her stance about finding someone on her level or higher. And what she says in the next clip is our starting point for why women raise weak men.
Right.
You know, are you going to find many men out there that makes as much as you do?
And my point is, so now you're going to, because we hear so much about women that are like, oh, there's nobody out there, there's no one out there, I can't find love, I'm getting too old. Now you're going to sacrifice the fact that you could find that love because the man's not making that much money, and you're going to date down.
All right.
Ooh,
They're robbing us. I have a feeling this is going to be our morning rush, actually.
I can do bad by myself. I can do bad by myself.
I can do bad by myself. That depends on what version of bad you mean. If it's quote-unquote bad in a positive sense, we wholeheartedly disagree, especially when it comes to raising boys to be men.
I sincerely believe that only men can make boys men. Now don't misquote me. I didn't say that a single female parent or female teacher cannot rear or educate her child. But she need not do that by herself. But she calls upon her father, her brother, an uncle, a male neighbor, a nephew, a co-worker. There needs to be some men in our children's lives. I want you to explain to me how a boy is going to grow up to be a man if he's never seen any. In order to be anything, you must see it first.
Unfortunately, modern women in general have this mentality that they can do it all by themselves, not understanding the severe consequences of children being raised by single mothers.
Now look, I often see people comment stuff when they're single, where they say things like, I don't need nobody.
Because let me tell you something. You don't. You can have your own. We have our own. I am self-sufficient.
You got your
I
own
don't
what?
need a man. I don't need a man. But guess what? I want you, and that's the difference.
What's one of those things that you really enjoyed learning about him that was like really different?
The thing that's different about him is that it's not about him being better. He's still a man.
Yeah.
But it's the loyalty that I like.
Oh.
You know what I mean? It's like I can leave.
Oh.
And he's there for me.
And
I have one friend, I was talking to her, and she's like, you know, I don't need no man, and I have
know who
my
you're talking
friends,
about
and-
immediately.
Yeah.
I don't need a man.
And I was like, girl, don't. And this is why I'm so emotional about it, because so many of our sisters are so lonely.
Yeah.
And they don't want to admit it. And all they got to do is just take a chance. So I don't want you to live your life without finding someone. Like when I go out on the road and I come back, it's so nice to have somebody to say, hey, or a lot of the things that you see, how we're divided, how we're mean, is because we don't have the love that we need. And you need to go out and find it. That one person.
Yeah, there's a
that
lot of
makes you feel good.
yes.
That one person that you can turn to when you have a bad day. And you don't have to turn to your girlfriends or your mama or somebody. You turn to that one person, he understands and looks in your eye. That's the one you keep, and I don't care what color he is.
I mean, you know what? Just so I can put things in perspective for the ladies, let's go around the table. So, or actually, you know, we don't even have to go around the table. Hypothetically speaking, I know I'm not any of your ladies' types after today's conversation, which is fine. I don't care. You know what I'm saying? So let's imagine we're at a nightclub, right? And I walk up to you and I approach you, right? And I'm your type, right? You know, I'm the guy that you like,
speaking.
right? Huh? What was that?
Hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically, of course, yeah. So anyway, I come up to you and I'm your type, and I go, oh my God, I love your bag. Oh my God, I love your shoes. Oh my God, where'd you get those Jimmy Choos? They're so hot. Oh my God. Then I say, you're really cute. I'd like to take you on a date. Would you come with me? What would you say?
No.
No? Around the table?
No. You had no confidence in any of that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a no for
I would
me.
talk
to you more.
Okay. So, well, you've heard this before, so hold on. And Kat, you've heard this before, Miss Russia?
She loves you. She wants to marry
Okay.
you.
So I'm willing to bet on a balance of probabilities, right? Because we work in the generalities here, that you guys are probably going to turn me down because I'm speaking to you in an effeminate manner and my sexuality is questionable. Correct? Feminine, speaking to you femininely, that's not attractive. That's exactly how men feel with masculine women that are not cooperative. Okay? And I had to give you guys that example so you can understand, okay, this is repulsive. This man is very feminine talking to me in a club. will never go out with this guy. That's how men feel about cooperative women. The difference, about masculine women that aren't cooperative.
It's right there. Elon Musk says civilization is going to crumble if people don't have more children. Why are people not having more children? Because they're doing this whole, I'll wait to 28. I'll wait till I grow up at 28. Then I'll start picking my mate. Then at the last second, I'll start dabbling into the eggs that I froze. Yeah, that ain't gonna work. Look at the birth rates already declining. We're beyond replacement level at this particular point. Good luck.
Not having a father in the house has negative consequences for boys and girls. but not having a father in the house usually has a greater impact on boys.
That the single most important cause by a long shot was that basically the boy crisis resides where dads do not reside. And when boys don't have, when there's one parent in the game and the other parent minimally involved or not at all involved, it's usually the mother that's the primary parent and the dad that's the secondary parent. And in those situations, the girls have challenges the daughters have challenges in more than 50 different areas. But the boys have challenges in more than 50 different areas also, but their challenges are more intense. They're more likely to commit suicide than the girls are by the data that you just gave. They're more likely to move into depression when you measure depression by male standards, which is almost completely unheard of, as opposed to just the female measures of depression. Almost all of our measures of depression are female measures. The boys are much more likely to become addicted to video games. Girls and boys both play video games. The video games are very healthy at a reasonable proportional amount of level to the rest of life. But when it comes to addiction to video games, boys are far more likely to be addicted to video games than girls are. Boys are far more likely to be addicted to drugs, to alcohol. Their depression leads them to feeling that they're worthless, and they become ashamed of themselves, and they fear that they're going to be rejected by girls. So they're much more likely to turn to pornography, because pornography is basically access to a variety of attractive women without fear of rejection at a price they can afford. And so guys, as they don't do as well in school, they don't feel as admired by girls. Girls tend to date winners, not losers. And so they feel that they're a loser, and that they fear that they can't risk rejection, because they know that the girls they're most attracted to are dating the quarterbacks or the student body president or some other guy that's really sharp and on the basketball team, etc. And so they start fearing, becoming introspective, becoming withdrawn, becoming rebellious, becoming very coercive to their parents, and they feel badly about themselves, and that leads them into depression, into suicide, into drinking, into drugs, into death from opioid overdoses, and into addiction to pornography.
Boys and girls are different, and therefore women lack understanding of boys' behavior, leading to difficulties in inspiring them, motivating them, keeping them motivated, and seeing their behavior as toxic will limit their growth and affect their self-esteem. And since the majority of teachers are women, these problems continue outside the home.
Because, for example, my son goes to kindergarten, not kindergarten, first grade now. He's in school. In 4 weeks that he was already in school, last week he tells me, "Mom, you know what I've noticed? All the teachers likes girls. They don't like boys." I say, "Why you feel this way?" He said, "I don't know. They just constantly tell boys, don't do this, and don't do this, don't do this, and don't do that." And believe it or not, they're already suppressing, by doing that, their self-esteem. So by the time the boys are men, they already have such a strong reaction to criticism that they block. Their defense mechanism goes so high, they're like, whoa. They don't hear you, they shut down, they're in a defense mode, and they literally, you talk, and they're like, nothing. And so the only way to really inspire a man, anybody else?
You can't put boys and girls in the same box because they're not the same, and men are the first ones to tell you that. Let's take a look at some of the differences between boys and girls in the classroom.
Of course, we found the boys are more aggressive, are more athletically inclined, have a shorter attention span, a slower maturation rate, as you said, are less cooperative, are larger than the girls, influenced more by their peer group, more advanced gross motor than fine motor, not as neat as girls, are louder than girls, like wearing hats on their heads, have a different walk, have a larger ego.
All of the things that Dr. Kunjufu mentioned proves why women struggle to raise men and why it's men that raise men. Before you know it, your child will be pumped full of unnecessary medication because the teacher can't handle him. Women are generally not interested in the things guys are interested in. These boys are not listened to. and they are neglected. They are not loved. And this attitude of quote unquote, I can do bad by myself is keeping these boys from having the essential role models they need to become men.
When I first started the Cave of Adullam, there was a plethora of boot camp programs, and it was all discipline driven. And they were failing at an alarming rate. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You think of martial arts, you think of only discipline. And so when I started implementing the training, I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't working. And I quickly discovered that our boys didn't need more discipline, they needed to be loved. And so once I was able to show them what it feels like, what it looks like to be loved by a strong man, to be guided by someone you can trust. Man, I had a group of kids who were, at least 6 of them, were predicted to not graduate from the 8th grade. All of them graduated.
Zeus! Zeus! That's what this is about. Good. Let's get to that. Why are you crying? That's what this is about, son. It's okay to cry. We cry as men. Why are you crying, son?
When you look at Jason Wilson's videos, where some of the boys cry during training, it highlights an important aspect of parenting. This is training. However, boys have the tendency to engage in rough and tumble play. And I quote, "Playful aggression teaches boys how to get along with one another, how to make and play within a rule structure, and how to actually recognize the difference between playful and harmful behavior." End quote. Dr. Michael Nagel. Women generally don't engage in rough and tumble play. How can you do bad by yourself when you do not have what it takes to do bad by yourself? It's not a coincidence that women have this mindset. Check this out.
The main flip was the option of developed nations that didn't have to worry about survival. The second flip was the government became a substitute husband when it started to make laws saying that if a woman didn't have a man that she was living with or was not married to a man, that she could get money from the government. And so the government became a substitute husband. And this was institutionalized through many, many programs like Women, Infants, and Children, which makes it clear that it's not men, infants, and children. It's not couples, infants, and children. It's not infants whose parents don't make enough money. So particularly in inner city communities that were poor, oftentimes, and particularly in African-American Black communities, there was oftentimes the Black male was not making a lot of money. And in those cases, when he wasn't, the woman and the Black male, both, usually a Black woman and a Black man, calculated that there was an inadequate amount of money that was coming from the father to support the children effectively. So she made sure that the father did not live with her. And so then, so she could get the money from the government. And that money came in multiple forms, but not just through the Women, Infants, and Children forms. And so the woman felt that the best way to protect her children was to not have the father around. But it turned out that was the worst way to protect her children, because the children without a dad are most vulnerable.
Just because you are the matriarchs of the family doesn't mean you're doing a great job raising your family. Just because your children have a roof on top of their heads and eat every day doesn't make you a good parent. Just because you have a college degree and make a lot of money doesn't make you a good mother or girlfriend.
We must first of all become aware. I believe the first way to solve any problem is to know the problem exists, to study. We have got to study more. And then we, especially women, have got to admit that boys need role models, especially male role models. And after we admit that, then we need to identify some male role models that will play that kind of position with our boys. And please don't lie to me and say you don't know any. In other words, on your block, in your extended family, where you work at, please don't say you don't know at least one positive Black man. In other words, just because the biological father is not there, does not mean there's not some other Black men available.
It doesn't matter what you've seen or whatever. Reality and your personal observations are two different things. Your personal observations don't necessarily reflect the reality and the truth in the world. The numbers show it. 90% of alimony is paid from men to women. That's a fact. 90% of custody battles go from the child goes to the mother. That's a fact. Okay?
And if it's a fact, it's definitely
So
true.
single mother households are the predominant form of how children are raised if they're in a single parent household. It's a single mom, not a single dad. Very rare. But in the situations where it is a single dad, they do far better at raising the children than the mother does. And that's a fact. Like, y'all don't have to like what I say, but it's the truth. You know? Like,
I mean,
there's no disputing that.
Has done her job.
Here's the reality.
Yeah.
This is why chivalry is dead and women killed it. I mean, y'all can say what you want to say, man.
It ain't
But
dead.
why is a man, real talk, like feminism is here. You know, women are more educated than ever before. They make their own money. You know what I'm saying? And as a byproduct of them making their own money and becoming more successful, you get a little bit more masculine energy. You're not going to be a heavy hitter making money by being passive and a pussy. You're going to become a little bit more masculine. But you can't expect men to be traditional, hold the door open for you, pay for the date, treat you like a lady, etc. when you guys are no longer traditional women. So guys have adapted to the situation because men haven't really changed. Women have.
Not only that, then increasingly you're telling women to be the opposite of what I think men want, right? The opposite. Maybe in the instant when men are not thinking with their big heads and they're saying, oh, well, she's half naked, great, I'm going to go for it. That might be what a man wants. But long term, that's not what a man wants. A man doesn't want a girl that's just going to be naked all the time and put herself out there available for every man to see. You know, that I don't have to be a man to know that that's not what men want. So then you say men suck. And I ask this question all the time. You complain about men, but are you being the type of a woman that a man would want?
And as we know, they still want to lean back on tradition, but then say tradition is old. They still want men to do the traditional things, but they are in turn progressive and they refuse to do anything traditional.
A dispute over child custody turns deadly in Texas, putting the state's stand your ground law to the test. The man who pulled the trigger claims it was self-defense, but the victim's wife says video of the confrontation tells a different story. We do want to warn you, it is difficult to watch. ABC's Zorin Shah reports for us.
Chad Reed was attempting to pick up his 9-year-old son from his ex-wife, Christina, seen here in the white shirt. Reed's current wife, Jennifer, capturing this video from her car, speaking exclusively to GMA.
He would do anything for time with his kids.
Kyle Carruth, Christina's new partner, joins the argument, brandishing a rifle.
Call 911.
Carruth shoots at Chad's feet. Then Chad appears to reach toward the gun. That's when Carruth fires 2 fatal shots. So far, no charges have been filed in the case.
Did you ever think that this could happen? No, I thought it was like a stun gun or a taser gun or something. Like, who's going to bring out? They're having a discussion about a custody thing.
Carruth's attorney writing in part, all Texans may lawfully brandish a firearm to protect themselves. Though Reed came unarmed, he announced his intent to kill Kyle Carruth with Kyle's own gun and took immediate, powerful action to do so, which was unsuccessful. Jennifer Reed's lawyer believes self-defense does not apply.
Whenever Mr. Carruth brought that firearm out, he's the one that escalated and provoked the situation.
According to ABC's local station, the district attorney recused their office. The police department turning the case over to Texas's attorney general.
The attorney general is going to be looking at justification of stand your ground, justification. Was there the threat potentially that Chad could harm Kyle or get his hands on the weapon? And so as a result, Kyle shot him.
Jennifer is also fighting to get custody of her husband's kids. Zorin Shah, ABC News Los Angeles.
Let me say this. Adultery and fornication are major sins that God condemns throughout the New Testament. In fact, he seems to bring them up more than other sins. It's just over and over and over and over again. He's warning us. Why? Because these are things that our flesh will tempt us to engage in, and we must deny self. We must deny that lust, and we must follow Christ and take up the cross. Now, let me say this about fornication. You know, it's a very serious sin in so much that the Bible even says that it can get you thrown out of the local church. 1 Corinthians 5 reveals that those who are in fornication should be thrown out of the church. I mean, it's a major, major sin. And you say, what are you talking about? Listen, if you're living together and you're not married, you're living in fornication. I'm talking about a man and woman that are living together and they're not married. You say, well, what are my options? Here are your options. Get married or stop living together. And you say, well, I'm just not ready for marriage. Then you're not ready to be living with somebody. Well, I'm just not ready for marriage. Then you're not ready to be sleeping with somebody. Because the Bible teaches that we should only have that within marriage. And within marriage, it's godly, it's holy, it's honorable. And outside of marriage, it's a major sin that needs to be denied. And you say, but I want to. Deny self. Deny the desire to commit sin and do what's right for the sake of Jesus Christ. That's what the Bible teaches. That's what it means to deny self. It means that when you get to the point where you don't want to stay with your spouse anymore, you stay with your spouse anyway because you don't want to be an adulterer or an adulteress. You get to the point where you desire someone other than your spouse. You deny that wicked, ungodly lust, and you stay true and faithful to the one to whom you said your vows. When you get to the point, young person, where you're tempted to commit adultery, you deny that lust and you keep yourself pure and holy and virgin until your wedding day. And you say, well, I've already blown that. But you know what? From this day forward, you need to be pure until you get married, until you say, I do. And by the way, so many women today are in relationships where they'd like to get married and the guy won't marry them. Well, let me give you a little saying. Why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free? You're sitting there and giving away your body to someone without demanding a ring on the finger, without demanding a commitment of marriage. You know what you're doing? You're cheapening yourself. You're worth more than that. You have more value than that. Save yourself for the one that will make a commitment unto you. Save your body for the one who will say, I'll be with you until death, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, not the one that's here today, gone tomorrow. It's hypocrisy to say, oh, we're committed to each other, then you'd be married. It's hypocrisy to say, oh, I'm not ready to get married. Then you're not ready for that either. You know, our society condones it. I don't. The Bible doesn't. Faithful Word Baptist Church doesn't. You say, well, why cover this? Why get fired up about this? I'll tell you why. Because I hate this stupid doctrine that makes marriage so easy to get out of. No, it's supposed to be binding. And you know why I hate this doctrine? Because I get too many phone calls from too many men who are saying, my wife's leaving me, I don't know what to do. And I hear from too many women that say, oh, my husband left me, I don't know what to do. I've seen so many people commit suicide. I've seen their lives ruined. I've seen lives destroyed, children destroyed, marriages destroyed. And you want to know what the number one reason why? It's a stupid doctrine coming from churches that says it's okay to get divorced. You just marry someone else and it doesn't matter. It's no big, it's just a party to them. That doctrine is garbage and I'm going to take it to task. Amen. And if a prominent Bible teacher is going to get up and teach this garbage and call everybody names if they don't agree with them, well, then I have the right to get up and say, you know what? This guy is teaching lies. Let's take him to task for it. Amen. But he said, well, no one can judge me because judge not that thou be not judged. And if you've ever lusted after a woman in your heart, you're guilty of adultery too. So it's fine. Yeah, but here's the difference. When men that are Christians lust after a woman in their heart, they don't say, I prayed and fasted, and God wants me to lust in my heart after a woman. Is that what they say? And in fact, I want to be an example everywhere as I lust after women. See, it's not the sin that's offensive. It's the justifying the sin and teaching other people to commit that same sin. And telling other people that divorce is okay. And planting that seed in their mind. And let me tell you something, I never want to be guilty of planting the seed in the mind of my congregation. Hey, you know, there's a way out of marriage. You can always throw in the towel. You can always get divorced. I'll never plant that seed. In fact, I want to go in with the trowel of God's Word and the hoe of God's Word and just rip up that seed and rip it out and rip up the root of that wicked plant, that wicked weed. And look, if you're divorced and you're remarried, I'm not attacking you. I'm not mad at you. Look, I have lots of good friends that are divorced and remarried. My parents are divorced and remarried. People make mistakes, but you know what? If you're going to go around and start telling everybody that God told you to do that and that God wants other people to do that, you're destroying people's marriages. You're destroying their lives. Hey, I don't want anybody in my church to listen to that liar, Ken Hovind, saying, oh, you know, it's great to divorce and get married to somebody else. You're a liar, Ken Hovind. Amen. And here we defended you. We helped you. We stood up for you. And then you call us Pharisees for pointing out what Jesus taught. I don't want the marriages in this church to be destroyed. I want every single person in this church to stay married to the person that they're married to right now. Amen. I want every single person, and I don't want anybody watching that Kent Hovind video and saying, well, my wife treats me like crap. Maybe there's a way out for me and I can go trade up for something different. Well, my husband treats me like crap. Maybe I can go trade up. No, it's till death. Amen. And you know what? I know how this game works. When people want to marry somebody else, you know what they do? They push the other person away, and then until they provoke them to divorce you, so that they can blame, oh yeah, they divorced me, they divorced me. I've seen it. Don't you tell me it's not out there. When people want to trade up their spouse, they start treating them like dirt, and they keep provoking them until finally they divorce them. And then they're like, oh, well, he divorced me. Oh, there's nothing I could do. Oh, she divorced me. There's nothing I could do. Hey, look, there's no excuse for it. And you know, it's kind of funny when the ink isn't even dry on the divorce papers and you're already getting married. And not only that, you're committing a double sin by marrying a divorced woman. Not only are you divorced, she's divorced. And you can, you know, and you say, oh, I'm going to leave the church because I'm divorced and remarried. Then get out. Get out if you're going to justify that sin to me. Now, look, if you've been divorced and remarried and you're willing to admit that it was wrong, great. Or if you think I'm wrong about this and you're willing to keep your mouth shut about it, great. But you know what? I don't want anybody to get up and teach publicly that divorce and remarriage is fine because it destroys people's lives. Because it's that kind of teaching that gives people a way out. And you know what? We need to have a do or die attitude toward marriage. And you know what? It's amazing. When people believe the doctrine that Jesus taught, that it's a one time, you get married, it's till death do us part, and there's no way out except the grave. Isn't it amazing how people find a way to make it work? They find a way to make it work. But when people have this other option, see, let me put it to you this way. Well, let's look at the scripture first. Luke chapter 16, verse 18. Whosoever putteth away his wife and marrieth another committeth adultery. Amen. Now, what is there something that anybody doesn't understand about that? Whosoever putteth away his wife and marrieth another committeth adultery. You say, oh, well, he didn't put away his wife, she put him away. Okay, how about this one? And whosoever marrieth her that is put away from her husband committeth adultery. Committeth adultery. If you marry a woman that's put away from her husband, divorced from her husband, you're committing adultery. And if you put away your wife, you're causing her to commit adultery. And if a wife puts away her husband and marries somebody else, I believe it says it that way. What, in Mark chapter 12 off the top of my head? Somebody help me out. Is it Mark 12? Some of you guys in the preaching class, we've been going through where to find things in different chapters. I want to say Mark 12. Is that right? Is it Mark 10? Oh, I had 12 in there somewhere. Yeah, how about this one? 10, 11. And he saith unto them, whosoever shall put away his wife and marry another, committeth adultery against her. And if a woman shall put away her husband and be married to another, she committeth adultery. Okay, so he says it all different ways in Matthew, Mark, Luke. But in Luke, it said, if you marry her that is put away, you're committing adultery. Oh, but I prayed about it. I fasted about it. He said, I sought godly counsel. I talked to 15 pastors, and 14 of them told me adultery's fine. If you say, I don't believe wives should be obedient to their husbands, you're probably not saved. Did you hear me? Because he that is of God heareth God's words. You therefore hear them not because you're not of God. Did you hear me? Yes, I said it. You say, well, I thought all you have to do to be saved is believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. You're right. But when you get saved, when you believe on Christ, you believe the Word of God. And when somebody shows you something point blank in the Bible that has no way to be misunderstood, there's no way to misinterpret that. When the Bible says that wives are supposed to be obedient to their husbands in all things, if you say, I don't believe that, that just tells me you're not saved. Because he that is of God heareth God's words, ye therefore hear them not, because you're not of God. And Jesus said, if they speak not according to this word, it's because there's no light in them. And the Bible said, my sheep hear my voice, and they follow me. And when you hear the voice of God and you say, I don't believe that. Hey, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. I believe in evolution. You're not saved.
Incarnated in the collective of fathers across time. And what is that? Well, it's a judge, that's for sure. It's a judge. Even when you interact with the hierarchy of men who are currently alive, something can be abstracted out of that that's like the patriarchal spirit. And if you don't think that's judging you, you are not thinking. It's absolutely judging you. That's what rank orders you in a hierarchy. It's even what the feminists accuse our culture of being, that disembodied, judgmental, patriarchal spirit. There's something to that. Of course, they think of it only as a tyrant, which is a big mistake. And so...
You're saying there's function to that, and that's a natural selection.
Well, there's function in it insofar as society itself is functional. I mean, the feminist critics, the radical leftist feminist critics, to be more precise, and not all of them are even feminist, make the argument that there's nothing in our hierarchies except tyranny and exclusion. It's like, well, that's completely preposterous. They say that while sitting in comfortable armchairs with the electricity on and the water running and no riots in the street and well fed and well clothed and protected from their enemies. I mean, it's so preposterous. I can't even believe we've even come to this point.
That's because of hierarchies that they're not looking at.
Of course.
Right.
And of course the hierarchies tend towards corruption and blindness, obviously. And when they become corrupt, then they're more likely to be dominated by people who use power as their fundamental mode of being. But that doesn't mean the bloody hierarchy is nothing but a corrupt tyranny of power to begin with. I mean, that's the definition of the ultimate authoritarian state. And if you think Western society is the ultimate authoritarian state, then your level of naivety is something on the order of miraculous.
Men are finally like, hey, we've given you all you want. You know, you are equal in every way, and then you're still shaming us.
It's an online subculture defined by anger and loneliness, translated into hatred for women. Jake Davison described himself as an incel, what appears to be a growing community of men who identify as involuntary celibate or unable to form intimate relationships with women.
You know, the reality is that, you know, love is for the young. You know, love is for the young. That's the fact of the matter. Love is for the young.
His videos have since been taken off message boards and forums, but you can see him clearly interacting with incel groups, describing his deteriorating mental health, posting this clip that he felt represented their plight.
Shunned, oppressed, and conquered by those we sought to escape.
And submerging himself into violent video games and gun culture.
Is this the latest face of evil in America?
This is not the first time that the incel movement, which started in the United States, has been linked to mass killings. Just 22 days ago, Davison was discussing US shooting sprees, claiming the UK had more guns than people think.
Jordan Peterson, thanks for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
We wanted to ask you the question that we think too few are asking, which is, why is this happening? Why are young men shooting up schools?
Because they're nihilistic and desperate.
How'd they get that way?
Well, I think life can make you that way unless you have a purpose and a destiny, let's say. I mean, there's no shortage of suffering and malevolence in life, and it's easy for people to become embittered by that. And if they don't see a way out, see a way forward, they get angry about it and turn against life itself. And they make a display of their hatred for being by massacring the innocent. That's what's happening. And they write that.
They do write that. It's accelerating.
Yes.
The reserve of guns has, I mean, we've had semi-automatic rifles for 100 years, but we haven't had this number of school shootings. So the attitudes are changing, I think it's fair to say.
Well, it's also also kind of a psychological epidemic. You know, these people keep track of each other, and there's a competitive element to it. And the fact that the media insists upon publicizing the names of these shooters is not helpful, because part of what drives them is motivation for notoriety, because notoriety is better than being ignored.
So what mistakes do you think we're making as a society to produce an ever-increasing number of young men like this?
That's a good question. I think we underestimate the necessity for young people to have clear direction and a sense of purpose in their life. They need something to offset the tragedy and malevolence of life. And we need to take these sorts of philosophical and even religious issues seriously, but we don't.
Do you think we're taking them less seriously than we used to?
Yes, definitely. I think that we talked in the past, we spoke much more about responsibility and responsibility in particular, but also purpose and maturity, and we valued those things highly. We didn't confuse them with tyranny and toxic masculinity, for example.
Speaking of toxic
masculinity,
why is it all boys?
Well, boys are more aggressive than girls, and there's a biological component to that that's quite strong. That's why the vast majority of people in prison are male. Like on average, there's not much difference in aggression between men and women. If you picked a random woman and a random man out of the population and you had to bet on who was the most aggressive, if you bet it was the woman, you'd be right 40% of the time. But if you take the 1 in 100 most aggressive people, and those would be the people in prison, they're all men, or virtually all men. It's also why males attempt suicide less frequently, but they commit it successfully much more frequently. They're much more likely to use lethal means. And there's a very powerful biological component to that, despite what the postmodern social constructionists have to say about it. But they've got their head firmly buried in the sand, so.
Yeah, no, they're resistant to the evidence and reality. We know that. So, but given that we know that boys are the ones, if there is a school shooting, who are going to be the ones committing it overwhelmingly, shouldn't we be thinking about how to raise our boys in a way that they're less likely to do this?
Yeah, I think we should be thinking about that. I mean, the book I published here, this 12 Rules for Life, is a meditation on exactly that. I've been lecturing online about the idea that responsibility is what gives life meaning, and that meaning is the antidote to the sort of nihilism and aggression and resentment that can otherwise be produced. I mean, there's no doubt that life is difficult and that people get hurt and betrayed. That's unassailable truth. You need something to offset that, and most people find that in their destiny, in their adoption of responsibility, and their willingness to make their own lives better and the lives of their families better, and to contribute to the community and to bear the burden of being nobly. And that works. But we don't think that way anymore.
You mentioned the toxic masculinity. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I've heard the phrase a lot. What does it mean in our public conversation when someone attributes the shooting to toxic masculinity?
Well, it's an attempt to smear the idea of masculinity by confusing masculine competence with tyranny. And it's part of the underlying idea that our culture is a corrupt, tyrannical patriarchy that was run by men for the advantage of men, which is a very pathological way of looking at the world, but a very common one. And if that description is accepted, then it means that masculine energy, so to speak, whether it's manifested by women or by men, but masculine energy does nothing but prop up the tyranny of the patriarchy, and so should not be fostered. And the only people who think that way are women whose relationships with men have been extraordinarily damaged, or men who have no idea who they are, or who are trying to shirk responsibility. The idea that masculinity in its essence is somehow toxic is an absolutely dreadful idea.
I'm glad I asked you that question. Jordan Peterson, thank you.
I mean, what controls the violence of man? What controls the fighting spirit of man is the Word of God. So if you reject the Word of God, what are you left with? And I'll tell you what it is. They want to emasculate men. That's their answer. That's the answer. Because, they're like, well, we can't just have this fighting spirit and this killer instinct, and then we tell them there's no God, and then we tell them that they're an animal, and then we tell them that they're just stardust or whatever. Well, then, they might just take a machine gun and go to school and shoot up the place because they've already been shooting it up on their video game. They've been watching all these violent movies, and violence has been glorified. And, hey, if they want something and they can't afford it, of course they're just going to steal it. And maybe they'll even beat someone up to get it. Maybe they'll even kill someone. Or maybe they'll just kill someone just for kicks. Because I'm telling you, the reprobate mind leads you to those kind of places. To where they're just beating people up for kicks. killing people for kicks. It's disgusting. It's horrible. So they have to do something. They don't want God. They don't want the Bible. So here's their answer. Let's emasculate men. Why? Because with freedom comes responsibility.
What is it truly like to be a man in today's society? What are the difficulties in relationship?
Being a man in today's society, in my experience, is giving and giving and giving and giving and ignoring what I want and need to give to those around me. I know that I am terrified of intimacy. I'm terrified of getting falsely accused. I am scared to death of trying to meet new people. I don't like people being around me. I don't like being vulnerable. When I'm vulnerable and I give you that power, that is scary. And I can't express that because I feel that you'll respect me less. I can't talk about what's going on. I cannot tell you why I am hurt because it becomes about them and not about me. And I end up turning to strangers on the internet who seem to care more about whether or not I'm on this side of the grass than the people who tell me time and time again, if something's wrong, just phone.
And one of the things you notice about children, for example, is if children don't get enough good attention, they'll certainly go after bad attention because the fundamental human currency is attention. And it's one thing to be hated, but it's another thing entirely to be ignored. And I would say, generally speaking, if you put people in a corner and you made them choose, you know, if they had knowledge that was transparent to themselves, you said, well, would you rather be ignored or hated? They'd take hated because at least then you exist, because you exist, at least in some part, in your relationship to other people. And so some of the bad behavior is rewarded precisely for that reason, is that it does draw attention and that does make you signify. I mean, you think about the people who do heinous crimes like the school shooters, people like that who do these things that are almost inconceivable. A huge part of the drive for that is fantasies about notoriety and the emergence from obscurity and anonymity. Even though it's notorious, it's hatred, the idea is, I'd rather be dead and infamous than alive and anonymous.
Yeah, which, by the way, you, I think, were one of the first websites to say we're not going to publish these people's names because then we're giving them exactly what they want.
Yeah, exactly. Like there have been, I don't want to take credit as like the first, because there are several, their names escape me, but there are other people who have been promoting this for a while. But yeah, I was late to it. We should have done it earlier.
And I talked to the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation about that about 10 years ago, about the idea that publicizing the names of these killers is precisely one of the mechanisms that ensures that it will continue to happen, and there's no doubt about that. Now, how to mitigate against that is very complicated.
Well, I mean, and that does tie to a deeper conversation. Did you see this study that was from the CDC that came out that, again, for the second straight year, life expectancy in the United States dropped? So you had consistent life expectancy increases in the United States for 150 years, and now, for the first time in modern American history, life expectancy has now dropped for 2 years in a row. And that's specifically due to two phenomena. One is the increase in heroin overdoses, and the other is suicide. Suicide is now at record rates in the modern era, and we had 70,000 heroin overdoses, opiate overdoses last year. I think it was 50,000 the year before. And so you're starting to see life expectancy decline. There's a crisis of meaning. And that's why, and I think that part of the resistance to, particularly I think Jordan, but I think also to me and to anyone else in the IDW who's at least searching for meaning, is that the left has been saying for a long time that we found the meaning, right? The meaning was do what you want to do. The meaning was no responsibility, do what you want to do. That's the meaning. The meaning is rebelling against the system. And when it turns out that a lot of people don't find meaning in that there is, in my perspective, a God-shaped hole in people's heart that is being filled by hatred and polarization and tribalism.
Or that you just can't do it forever. No one can maintain that level forever of trying to tear everything down all the time.
Well, it's also,
right?
there's nothing in it, especially as your opponent weakens.
And there are a number of factors here that have been identified as being associated with the development of antisocial personality disorder. Some of them I think are more or less common sense, and some of them are actually quite surprising. So the first environmental factor is maltreatment as a child. And this is usually categorized as emotional neglect and abuse, physical neglect and abuse, and sexual abuse. So all these together would be considered maltreatment as a child.
The worst things to happen to gender dynamics is this. They put a smartphone with a camera into women's hands. That was disastrous for relationships and gender dynamics. From there, she can worship herself. She can broadcast to other people to worship her. So much so that if she has a spouse, a boyfriend, or whoever, people pursuing them, They cannot match the attention that she can get on her own. They cannot match the attention that she can get via Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, all of these vehicles to broadcast herself for women's worship. And the beta males are eating it up. Certain age group, young girls develop, they're gonna get a lot of attention. Young boys are simply not. He's gonna witness his female counterparts on TikTok, 10,000 followers, 20,000, 30,000, million followers. What does that do to the dynamics and the hierarchy on campus? Can he get this girl now? He has no chance, and he's gonna grow up with them through high school believing I have no chance at women. The self-esteem of this kid is going to get killed. The only thing he can reach out now to are Instagram thoughts and pornography.
Women have an overly entitled sense of self-worth and have this belief that they're worth significantly more than what their true marketplace value is. Women struggle with that. They have a very, very hard time accepting that. At some point, they may smack into a wall and realize, oh wow, that was an eye-opener. There's usually some moment where they realize, I need to lower my expectations. I need to have a more realistic standard of my worth out there.
I'm justified in terms of there's a lot of good men that are locked up.
Let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there, ma'am.
Okay.
I need to stop you right there. I need to stop you right there. I need you to pay attention. 51% of black men are single and childless. 64% are in the middle class. So you can go ahead and take that 1980s talking point back over to color purple land, because that shit is factually inaccurate and untrue according to black people statistics. Go to blackdemographics.com, saying as though you want to, oh, those are white folks. Then go to blackdemographics.com, black statistics for black people about black people, and they'll show you.
Well, either way, it's a lot.
So 51%. No, ma'am. See what you did? You just try to skip. See, every time I make a point, you instead of saying, "Damn, I didn't know that," you're gonna still try to be right. Now we talk about you. Well, if I asked your husband why y'all divorced, what would he tell me?
Domestic violence.
Okay. How often did you beat his ass?
No, I'm the victim. And I'm okay with that. It was a growing pain. I thank God I got out alive.
And how long you been divorced?
For 2 years.
2 years. How long were y'all married?
For about 7 months.
7 months. Now hold on. I know I got a new calculator, but you got kids that are like in their 20s.
Right.
About 2 different guys or about one?
About one.
Why didn't you marry him?
The last one?
No, the one that impregnated you once or twice.
Oh, he went to jail.
Oh, so you pick ass whoopers and felons. And then you're gonna complain about what other. I need you to stop right here, ma'am. I need you to slow the whole. I need you to slow the whole French toast down. I'm not gonna let you get on here and talk about what black men are not when you pick and dudes that whoop your ass and are felons. See, I'm not gonna sit around and let you black women just sit around and talk about hey, black men ain't here and they ain't this, they ain't that, when in your own life you pick shit.
You can see here, this chart's talking about hypergamy, but this is kind of how we're living now here in the blue. 30% of men legitimately are virgins and incels. Then you have the men in the middle, 654. Those men are just, they're getting very little attention. They're trying, they're doing their best. They're learning game. They're swiping right. They're doing a whole bunch of things not working. And then you have 10-9-8. 10-9-8 are cleaning up. 80% of women are having sex with 20% of the men.
In between that.
All right,
It's
so
minimum.
we're looking for your ideal man right now. Let's see the percentage. And ladies, it's loading. Yeah, it's loading. We're gonna have to do a couple of drum rolls for this one. This one might take a bit. And none of you guys better change up your
Dude, for real? Like minimum $1 million?
There we go.
0.019. What if he was like the most?
Let's see if we can find the ideal man here for
I got better chance than her.
No,
that's
this
worse.
is less. That's the
No,
funny
we
part.
know that.
I'm just saying 80 because it's like, you know what I'm saying? I would.
Okay.
Ooh,
Oh, okay.
okay, so at least I got 0.64. Oh, wait, no.
Talk about something called hypergamy, right? Which is like women dating up, wanting a man that's better than them in different facets of life. Typically it's they want the provisioning and security on one end, but they also want an attractive guy that's physically attractive as well from a height standpoint, jawline, physique, etc. So, and shout out to Rollo Tomassi, he talks about this book and talks about this in his book, The Rational Male, the two sides of hypergamy.
Yep.
So, in today's day and age with the globalized marketplace, girls have more options than ever before. So, if a girl's on a dating app, women have all the leverage on dating apps because almost 80% of the users on dating apps are men. So, supply and demand. There's far more men, far fewer women, so the women can be selective. So even girls that aren't necessarily as attractive have higher standards now because they have the ability to do so.
Finding that 1 in a million guy is very rare. It doesn't happen every day. It's a once or maybe twice in a lifetime thing.
Why? Because a woman's value is determined on what kind of caliber of man that she can attract. If the man could bring value to society, he's a high value man because the market decides his value. The woman's value is determined by the man's value. Your value is not determined by some... Stop thinking that your value is determined by some... A lot of y'all niggas care way too much about what think about you. The world determines your value based on the value that you bring to it, man. Because I don't want guys focusing their life on women, man. I don't want guys hurting themselves over women.
Yeah.
There's dudes out here that are killing themselves over women. That don't give a women are not designed to be loyal. They're designed to look for the best. So you become the best.
Bars.
Damn, man.
Straight bars.
Going on to number 2.
Somebody clip that, please.
Wait,
Somebody please clip that part of the show because that was awesome. Not gonna lie.
I really care, man. I really care. Like every time I see a dude that hurts himself over some chick, bro, it just infuriates me because I know that dude has the potential to change the world, man.